Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this afternoon I'm joined by Laura Bradburn. We're here to discuss Livingston 0, Celtic 3. Laura, fairly comfortable in the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it's the way of things sometimes when you've got, you look at the players we were able to bring off the bench: Abada, Turnbull, Abelgord, Yakimakis, Jota. You know, those players all have an argument to say they should be in the Celtic first team, never mind on the bench. So when Livingston have been working as hard as they've been working to try and close us down the entire game and to defend for their lives, and then we can just say between 60 and 90 minutes we're going to effectively replace half our team with starters of that quality. It was no surprise that it ended up the way that it did.
No, you're right. And again, I'm keen to bring in the comments from the viewers out there. Let us know where you're watching the game, what time of the day or night it is, because I know if you're in Australia, it'll be night time for sure. And this is a day, I think, where, in the past, Laura, there would have been a wee niggling concern in the back of your mind because of the poor record we had in Livingston. Ange Postecoglou has dismantled that, and we're starting to get results there, and that was very comfortable. Autumn Glow doesn't think it was a penalty. I think looking back on the VAR decision, I thought they got it right. It was the hands to ball, unnatural position. It was pretty clear cut for me, I thought, Laura, but we'll go through all the different talking points for sure. Ian McGinley, our play was brilliant, but our finishing was still poor yet again. That's fair enough if you come away with 3 or 4 goals. I think it's frustrating if you drop points or it's in the Champions League where you don't quite get as many chances. But take your point, Ian, for sure. Pinball, if only Albie was still around. Albie and Ayeti's doing all right, actually, since he was loaned out, and hopefully that will turn out well for him. And he'll get the move. Paddy, yeah, it is an important 3 points. Always an important 3 points in Livingston. And we'll start off, we'll go back to the first half. A lot of the talk around the lineup, the selection of Ange Postecoglou to go for Kyogo over Yakimakis. Both players played a part. Let's start off with Kyogo and Yakimakis and their contribution. Kyogo obviously got a goal, cracking opening goal. Decent display by Kyogo. Did a bit of work in the second half, done a bit of defensive work, and is eventually replaced by Yakimakis, who didn't have his finest afternoon, it's got to be said. But let's start off with Kyogo. How impressed were you, Laura?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the praise that he gets, and rightly so, has been said so many times before. He's just got this industrious work rate that you can't ever tire of loving, because having had players over the last number of years, up to the last half of a decade, whose motivation that you queried, it's one thing you can never query about Kyogo. You can query whether everything he tries comes off. You can query whether he's having the game he should be having or whether he's as involved as he should be. But one thing that you can never criticise is that he's always trying his best to make things happen, and that's something that I think drives the entire team forward. Situations like today, this game could have so easily become a lot more scrappy and a lot more ugly to watch than it was. It wasn't the greatest game of football, but you get the feeling that with Kyogo having the determination he does to create things and make things happen, it must rub off on his teammates. And I think as much as his natural footballing ability is there for all to see, that's something he brings to the team as well.
He's a player that he's been a revelation since he signed. And, I think that when we go from the highs of some of the similarities and the comparisons we were hearing, Laura, to the lows of the last few weeks where, some people in the comments section were saying that we need to ship him out, which was bizarre, I felt. The knee-jerk reaction. Do we need to be more patient with players like Hugo? If Hatate or O'Reilly has a wee bit of sticky form during the season, surely we need to show a wee bit more patience with the guys. They've shown us what they can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think talking about that comparison that we talked about between Kyogo and Larson, I mean, you can excuse people for getting a bit overexcited when we saw what we saw with him, but I think, to be fair to him, the comparison was never that he is as good a footballer as Larson, or he has the finishing of Larsson, or that he's going to have the impact at Celtic that Larsson had. The observation was that in terms of natural footballing ability and talent, he's as good as any player we've had since Larsson, and I still think that remains. Now, his consistency level has been shown to be nowhere near that of Larsson or many other players in a Celtic shirt, but I don't think you can deny that on his day and on his best day, he's as good a footballer as Celtic have ever had, I would say.
I've seen a decent comment on the socials during the first half saying that they maintain, a Celtic fan maintains, he's the best we've seen two-footed since Moravcik. And you've seen these comparisons. I remember the goal when he scores against Hibs in the League Cup final last season, Laura. No one else on the park could do that. And that's what he brings. You know, he's one of these guys that can pull a rabbit out of a hat. He's a game changer, all these different cliches. But the types of players we've had in the past is the reason why some fans compare them. And you know, you speak in the same breath. And I just feel that on a day like today where he goes out there and he does the business, and like you say, that breakthrough really took the sting out of the game, which was a positive for Celtic actually, because you know, the longer that went on, had it gone into half time scoreless, it would have been a tricky second half to, you know, negotiate. But Kyogo did all that, and I think that, you know, it's a timely reminder, isn't it, that these guys are performing at such a high level, and from time to time they might have 2 or 3 bad games, and I think that's all it came down to with Kyogo. Unfortunately, one of those games was in Europe where, you know, a goal at that moment where he's put through by Giakoumakis might have made all the difference. But he's been a fantastic addition to the Celtic side. He's got an infectious character. It was great to see him again running about with a smile on his face after his defensive display. But he was replaced by the big man, Giakoumakis, who I think has been, you know, over the piece when you look at his goal scoring record. The minutes he's had on the pitch, he's been phenomenal in the starts. And I thought when he comes on, right, he's going to be able to, you know, get rid of the ghosts of the past. 1 year ago today, strangely enough, he misses a penalty against Livingston in injury time, and we draw the game. He steps up, you think, right, he's just going to put it all right, and he misses the penalty again. He doesn't look great on a plastic pitch. I mean, I know we were banging on about that before the game, Laura, but I just don't know if his touch is there. I remember the most critical I've ever been of Giakoumakis was against Alloa Athletic. They've got a plastic surface as well, don't they? Mm-hmm. And it just seemed the ball doesn't stick with him. That's one of his greatest assets, I think. And I spoke to Kev McCluskey about this during the week in the European game. It's the way the ball sticks to him. Samaras was brilliant at that in Europe. Giakoumakis seems to be really, really good at it. But on a plastic surface, he doesn't seem to have that. The ball, the first touch, it wasn't there. He misses a penalty. But again, no knee-jerk reaction from me, Laura. It's just a bad day at the office for the big fella, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it is. And there's an argument to be said that the surface itself maybe contributed to the fact that he missed the penalty, because he tried to hit it low, tried to almost roll it in. And anybody knows if you hit a ball with a certain amount of pace and it responds differently to how it would on grass, it's going to change the trajectory of it. Now, I'm not trying to make excuses for the guy. I still think a striker of his ability should be able to score a free shot from the 12-yard penalty spot with his eyes shut, basically. So he should have done it. But there's an argument to say he missed at Livingston last time, he missed at Livingston this time. Maybe there's something in that. A lot of people say he shouldn't be on penalties now. I would still like to see him break the duck of it, if you like. Get the monkey off his back and convert a penalty, because he must have the ability to do it. And it's just been, like you say, a bit of a bad day at the office for him as far as that's concerned.
Just a wee bit unfortunate. Bohid Bob actually comes in to say, think we have seen why Giakoumakis never started. Must kind of hate the plastic. That said, how that is a penalty in the other week does not get looked at. Job done. Solid. Next. Yeah, absolutely. I do think, obviously, the one against Hearts was a definite penalty. And today I also feel it was a penalty. I know we've had some commenters saying they didn't think so. Vincey comes in and has the audacity to say that Colm had a decent game. Actually, Vincey, we said that at half time. It's very unusual for us to sing the praises of any of the officials in Scottish football, but he did. He let things go a wee bit. Laura, and some might say that that's not why he's there. He's there to obviously lay down the law. I think he allowed the game to flow as much as the game against Livingston's going to flow. There was a few occasions he might have been able to give a yellow, but he just had a wee word in the player's ear. Bit of common sense, I thought. And by the way, I'm not a fan. Absolutely not a fan. But one last question I'm going to ask in relation to the Kyogo and Giakoumakis discussion. I don't think we'll see too many games where the two of them play or start the game for Celtic, Laura. I know we did against Shakhtar there at Celtic Park. One of them has a Champions League goal under their belt, the other doesn't. And much of the criticism I feel around Kyogo has been that he hasn't made that step up from domestic to Champions League football. And whilst I don't think his performances have been fantastic in the Champions League, again, I just think that it's too early to say that. It's too early to come to that conclusion, I feel. Giakoumakis has scored his goal. He's broken his duck in the Champions League. I think that his physicality is much better suited to the Champions League because he seems to get away with it more, which is what should happen. I mean, he gets penalised too much in the domestic game. Obviously, this might change in the Bernabeu. Kyogo might break his duck in the Bernabeu, and I hope he does, Laura. Do you have any concerns about those two players specifically and how they've performed in the Champions League? Have you been pretty happy with Giakoumakis like I have, and you're thinking the jury's out on Kyogo, but we've got to be patient?
I think both of them have elements of their game that they need to improve at that level. I think, for my money, Giakoumakis is more of a cert to take a chance in a lot of situations than Kyogo is. But if Kyogo's got a bit more, and by that I mean like a snatched chance, but if Kyogo's got a bit more time on his hands, then you would rely on him to take a chance as well. I think Giakoumakis is going to always have the edge physically, but then you would expect in that sense that Kyogo might be the better option in Europe because sometimes you do get a little bit more time on the ball just because of the way that the European teams play. But it's difficult. I don't think one or other of them has given a better performance than the other in the Champions League. I think they have both shown some of their strengths and both shown a majority of weaknesses that just prove that they're just off that level at the moment. I don't think either of them is so far away from that level that they're beyond coaching to that level. It was like we were talking about before the show. You just hope that if they can get to the real top of the game in that sense, then hopefully it happens in a Celtic shirt rather than them having to go elsewhere to do it.
What about some of the other players we've been talking about and some of whom we'll continue to talk about in the show today, and how they have made that step up to the Champions League? What's been your take on players such as Juranovic, Jota, Carter-Vickers, Hatate, O'Reilly, players who have really starred for Celtic since they came in? Do you think they've made that step up that we would expect?
I think so. One of the players who I think possibly has been more of a passenger, to use Jim Orr's phrasing from yesterday, is Jota. But sometimes I feel as though, again, like I said about the Celtic team today, I feel a bit for the wide players in that they can't really help if the play goes down their side or not. And sometimes I think in Jota's case, the play has been focused down the other side of the pitch, and so he doesn't get a chance to get as involved. So maybe his lack of involvement or his lack of impact is not always completely down to him. Hatate, I think if you could eliminate the silly mistakes that he makes, if you could eliminate the amount that he gives away the ball, there's no doubt that he's got the natural ability when he does things right to play at the very top of the game. I mean, we all know about that pass against Real Madrid that went viral. That's the kind of ability that he's got there. He just needs to show it more often. And as far as the backline's concerned, Carter-Vickers, I have no concerns about. You just have to hold your hands up and say sometimes he's playing against a higher level of opposition that are going to pick him apart. Jens definitely shows that he's got a little bit more naivety there that I think needs coached out of him, but he's still relatively young in that sense, and I think he's got all the hallmarks of a top defender. So I think it's difficult as well, though, because one player you didn't mention there is Greg Taylor, who I think sometimes benefits in Europe almost from the fact of, and I say this from a personal point of view, I've said many times on this show, Greg Taylor is absolutely adequate for domestic football, but isn't up to scratch for European football. And so sometimes I feel I don't even then assess him or scrutinise him in Europe as much as I would, because I just expect, well, he's not at that level anyway. But he's actually shown himself to be quite the opposite. He's been one of our more consistent performers in Europe and domestically, and I think that's worth highlighting, because, as I always say, I'm more than happy for a player to prove me wrong if it means they're playing better for Celtic.
Yeah, I mean, that was always the chat, wasn't it? You know, we had an upgrade on Tony Ralston with Juranovic. We had to do the same with Greg Taylor, and lo and behold, Greg Taylor is one of our best performances both at home and in Europe all season. Today was no different, and there's a few comments coming in. Gary Melrose, what a peach from Griegsy. Is that what we're calling him? Griegsy, is that his nickname? Connor McLeod, what a player Greg Taylor is as well. He has really proved a lot of us wrong. Let's have a look at the kind of the arc or the trajectory, the upwards trajectory of Greg Taylor's Celtic career. He comes in as a very highly rated player domestically. Some might remember his sensational tackle on Joey Barton when he was playing for Kilmarnock against Rangers. He comes in, he's being looked after at the time by Jackie McNamara, and he doesn't play. He came in, didn't really get a game. It's only really since, I think, Ange Postecoglou's come in that we've seen the real Greg Taylor. And I'm going to say, I think he's definitely up there. There's an argument to suggest that he's the most improved player at the club under Ange. Now, I know there's been a few others, Laura, like Tony Ralston. He's had so much column inches written about him, so much Acsom at times spoken about him, and rightly so. He's now just, you know, a solid part of the team, isn't he? Ralston, he plays today. You have no concerns over him. Greg Taylor's up there, though, isn't he, in terms of how much he has improved under Ange Postecoglou. How big a part of that is down to the gaffer having a belief in him, and obviously Taylor himself developing and progressing his own career in a position that he'd probably never played before until Ange came to the club?
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. Ange Postecoglou is a coach. He comes in and he coaches players. Greg Taylor didn't have that in any way, shape or form before Ange Postecoglou came along at Celtic. I firmly believe that the previous incumbent in the job bought players and expected them to do the job that he thought they were brought to do. And if they didn't do it, they were out and somebody else was in. Ange Postecoglou brings them in, assesses whether they have the ability and the potential to do what he wants them to do, and then decides on whether he can coach that into them or not. And Greg Taylor's a player very much like that. There are some players don't need coaching. They know the game so well, and they've got such a footballing brain that they can do it off their own back. Maybe Greg Taylor doesn't fit into that category, but what he is a hard worker and somebody who will listen and who will learn. And you can bet your bottom dollar that if you're going to listen to anybody in terms of how to improve your game, it's Ange Postecoglou. Let's not forget Postecoglou played that position or similar as a player, so perhaps he's got more knowledge and more wisdom to share with Greg Taylor than he does many of the other players in the squad, and it's certainly shown to be of benefit.
Yeah, I mean, Taylor, I've said there's an argument to say he's the most improved since Ange Postecoglou came in. I have not always been a massive fan of Greg Taylor, I've got to say. I didn't see enough in him to think that he could make this fabled step up, but he has done. And I don't just mean in Europe, Laura. I've spoken before about so many players that impress domestically. You know, they're definitely the best player outside of Celtic or outside of Celtic and Rangers, and they get the move and it doesn't happen. And that's happened over the years so many times. And I thought Taylor was basically in that bracket. I thought if it was going to happen, it would have done so. And then Ange comes in and completely changes that. Taylor, of course, scores the second goal, and what a goal it was. It took him a while to get off his, to break his league duck. But now he's scored a second. Fantastic drive. Superb composure. He got the power and the accuracy in it, and he nutmegs the goalie, something we Kyogo couldn't do in Europe. What a goal. And, it's wee moments like that when you see him celebrating against Hearts, when you see him celebrating against Livingston, that you think to yourself, he must have gone through a whole host of emotions over the period of time that he's been at Celtic, Laura. But he must feel now he's arrived. It's just a shame for him, I think, that in terms of internationally, we've got so many good left backs at the moment as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can't think of any player who's more deserving of that call-up, but like you say, we seem to just produce good players in that position for Scotland, and it's unfortunate from his point of view that that's the case. The thing I really liked about the goal today was, it was kind of getting headed here, there and everywhere, and there'd been multiple chances, and I think it really benefits a player the way Greg Taylor did today, to be the only one in the crowd of players who had a cool head, who was watching from the outside, watching the ball. Everybody else is looking up in the sky at it. He's waiting for it to drop, and he knows exactly what he's going to do. And more than that, he thought, rather than try and leather it so hard to make it go into the top corner out of the reach of the goalkeeper as you would normally do, he's had the intelligence to say, no, there's a massive bodies in front of me here. I can take advantage of that by just hitting it as hard and low as I can. The goalkeeper's not going to see it till very late, and hopefully if I get enough on it, it's going to be so late that he's not going to have time to react. And that's exactly what happened, because the ball didn't even end up very far from the goalkeeper, but it was so quick in coming to him that he couldn't even stick a leg out to kick it away. So I think, there's an argument to say that it was a bit of a hit and hope, but I think there was more in it, and I would give Greg Taylor more credit than that for it. I think it was a fantastic and very smart goal of him to score, as well as the fact that he obviously had the technique to do it in the first place.
Yeah, brilliant technique, because you can see the ball spinning when it comes to him on the super slow-mo, but the minute he strikes it so cleanly. And it's probably the fact that, people might say it's straight at the goalie, but the goalie's rooted to the spot. If there's a bit of movement there, at least the goalie has an option to move, but he's rooted to the spot, and he can't, change his feet quickly enough. It's a fantastic goal, and it gives you that cushion that you need, I think. At half-time, a lot of the comments that were coming in, Laura, we need that second goal, we got it. And it was, within that first 10-15 minutes, like we said, the second half, Taylor really gives us that cushion, and then you think to yourself, all right, Ange can make his changes 65 minutes in, which he did, and the whole complexion of the game is completely different. I want to talk about a few other performances before we get to Jota's goal, the third goal. Firstly, Moy, because that was a player that you had a wee concern about in terms of the starting lineup, Laura, but I mean, he played his part today. I'm trying to remember if there was anything of concern. Probably not. He's one of the players I feel that he's on a short leash. If he does make a mistake, it's highlighted. Like against Hearts, he made that. He missed that brilliant chance. But then you start looking at his involvement in the goals we did score. What was your take on his performance today?
I think he was a bit more dynamic than I maybe gave him credit for. I'll give him that. And I think he was as involved as I would want him to be in the game. I thought he was very effective at what he did. He's still not my preferred choice, but you can't argue with a player who brings as much as he did to the game today, and we win as comfortably as we do. You've got to give credit there where it's due, and I think he definitely deserves that. I have to admit, I'm still not entirely sure that I would think that he was an Ange player unless Ange had worked with him before, as he obviously has done in the national team and things like that. So he kind of sticks out in that sense. But it's obvious that Ange knows exactly what he can get out of the player, and even though he might not be the most gifted footballer in the world, he can do exactly what's required of him. And as we said about Greg Taylor there, Ange values that as much as he does ability in players, as the ability to do the job that they're asked to do, and to let go of ego in that sense. I'm sure he's not got time for time wasters, and that's the biggest compliment you can pay Moy, as well as he's obviously come in and done the job that the manager's asked, because he knows the manager is asking him to do a job that will affect change on a game and be as impactful as possible. So basically what I'm trying to say is I've tried to pick apart potential selections that Ange has made, and I've been shown up once again.
The thing with Moy, he strikes me, Laura, as being one of the guys that's low maintenance. You know, you could drop him and not give him a game for a few weeks, and he won't be rattling on your office door asking you why, and then you can throw him in. And he'll do the job exactly the way you've instructed him to do it. And I think that's like a manager's dream, isn't it? Like you say, the ego will not be there. He's an experienced head. He's calm and composed. But if he was to be dropped for the Bernabeu even, although he'd be particularly disappointed in that, I don't think he would give the gaffer too much hassle. He was asked, Ange Postecoglou, around the motivation of international football, World Cup finals, etc. And, you know, Ange gave his typical answer that he doesn't even think about that kind of stuff. He doesn't use that as leverage to try and motivate players. He's all about the club, which I do like. I really do like. But I know that there's a lot of players out there who are very much motivated by representing the club at the country rather at that on that stage.
I think Ange could have gone further in that comment, to be honest. I mean, if you need to remind a professional footballer that there's a chance they could play for their country at the World Cup if they play well for their club, then there's a problem with that player anyway, never mind whether he's motivated to play for the club or not. I think you need to give professional footballers more credit than that. I think they know exactly what the potential benefits are of good club football. If we're talking about the World Cup, you can bet they'll be talking about the World Cup. They don't need that as a motivating factor. And from that point of view, whether Ange means in terms of representing Celtic should be an honour enough, or whether it's just that it's not a tactic he would want to use, he doesn't need to use it. The players are fully aware of what they can benefit from, and I don't think it's necessarily something that you need to beat them over the head with.
No, especially Moy at his stage of his career. There can't be that many more opportunities to play on that kind of stage. Taylor, 24 years of age, that was his 100th appearance. 4 goals now, 18 assists. Not a bad return for a left back, is it really? What do you think of this then? Do you take him off the penalties? Christopher Patterson reckons that Giakoumakis is taken off the penalties. Or do you do the old reverse psychology and keep him on them to get over that wee hump?
I think I mentioned it before. If he was this might be a bit too basic, but to me, if he was a defender who happened to be a bit of a penalty specialist and had missed, or even a midfielder in that sense, I might say, yeah, take him off penalties. He's obviously not got what it takes. But this guy's a striker. His job is to finish goals, to finish shots. And I know that there's technique involved in penalties that maybe not every striker's going to have, but I don't think Giakoumakis falls into that category. And I actually think it would be detrimental to his confidence to take him off penalties if he's on the pitch. I think if he wants to take one, you let him take it. He'd have to miss an awful lot more penalties before I thought about taking him off as well.
Yeah, for sure. 3rd goal scored by the one and only Jota. Danny Boy reckons he's the best in Scotland by a country mile. It was great to see him back, and it reminds us again, Laura, that, you know, Shakhtar Donetsk, it was a tight game, it was one each. We were without Jota, Callum McGregor, Carl Starfelt. And although I think Gents and Carter Vickers have developed a really good relationship at the back, those 3 players were pivotal to our performances last season and winning the double. They're very, very important players in the team. Arguably, all 3 of them are first picks. And they have been missed, and we need to focus on that. I know that Shakhtar had a few players missing the other night, but they 3 guys are 3 of our most important players. Jota comes back today. Great to see him back, and he caps it all off with an excellent finish, by the way, I've got to say. And, you know, I thought David Turnbull done really, really well, because he just ignored the fact that there was shouts for offside, which were not. It was not the case. He was definitely onside, and he lays on Jota. It was a fantastic finish. Great to see him back in a Celtic jersey.
Yeah, I mean, David Turnbull is a player that I really, really admire. I think he has been slow to get back to the player he can be, following what was quite a significant injury last season. But I think he brings something to it. The thing that I'm liking about this squad, I mentioned it about Haksabanovic before the game. I'm mentioning it about Jota. I mentioned it about, you know, the contrast between Kyogo and Giakoumakis is the system remains the same, but what the players can offer is always different. And you can't tell me that Aaron Moy and David Turnbull offer the same thing, or Hatate and McGregor, or O'Reilly and McGregor, or whoever you want to pair up in that midfield. They all know how the system works, but they all know the strengths that each of them brings to it, and I think they're all equally as valuable for it. I'm really hoping to see a lot more of David Turnbull as the season goes on, because I think he's still one of the best passers of the ball that we've got, and I think that could be vital in unlocking defences like Livingston's between now and the end of the season.
For sure, you look at players like Turnbull, Jota coming back in, McGregor coming back in, the fact that Starfelt will be training, and Welsh will be training, they'll be coming back in soon, and then in January we should strengthen again, Laura, and really just up the game, up the tempo in terms of our performances. An interesting point, yeah, you're right, Andrew, maybe it's not Giakoumakis' fault. We don't get penalties that often. Who's going to take next season's? You're right. That was the first penalty since April, and of course Giakoumakis missed one exactly 1 year ago today, but we win 3-0, so it's a footnote that no one will really pay much attention to, Laura. I think Giakoumakis will have his own standards, and he'll be looking to get back on the score sheet ASAP. Another big game coming up. I hope you can join us during the week. We go back to the Bernabeu, and you know what, it'd be brilliant to get a result over there, because I think over the piece, Celtic's performance in this campaign has been decent. There's been plenty of positives to take from it. It's not as though everything Ange has done, you look at us on that stage and you think we're not really progressing. That's not the feeling I'm getting as a Celtic fan, for sure. And it would be brilliant to go out there, and brilliant experience for the players. I'd love to see Jota playing at the Bernabeu, so hopefully he's fit enough to start as well. Laura, it's always an absolute pleasure. Every single one of you see the names and the avatars popping up, and they're becoming more and more recognisable. If you haven't done so already, get yourself subscribing to the channel. If you want to support what Acsom does, there's a few links underneath this channel. You can buy tickets, for example, to go and see Bend It Like Bertie, the fantastic Jim Orr's play with Des McLean. You can buy some merch, including this shamrock top to my left, and you can do various other things like donate to the birthplace of our football club. Laura, you've been given a sneak preview of the charity single. Yes, we are moving into the music world finally. Acsom collaborating with the Wakes, JJ Gilmore and Gary John Kane, and we've got a song, it's called The Glory and the Dream. You've heard the latest mix. What's your thoughts?
I think the phrase "stirring anthem" springs to mind, and I think that's apt. I think that it's just proof again of what can happen when a bunch of talented people come together to do good for good causes, and it's certainly one that I'll be purchasing as soon as it's available. Not just because of the song's quality, but because of what it means. And I would urge everybody, as soon as the link is shared, be a small part of history in terms of what Celtic supporters can do, and be part of this charity single, because not only are you supporting good causes, but you're supporting the talents and the hard work of all the people behind it who have put it together. And I have to say, from my point of view, and from a lot of the contributors' point of view, we get a lot of plaudits for what we do as part of Acsom, but I have to say that this is of no this was not any of our work. This was your work, and this was the work of the guys behind it who wrote the song and performed the song and recorded it and everything, and they deserve all the plaudits, whether or not they're the people in front of the camera or not. So yeah, I'm really excited to see everybody's response to it, and potentially what it could raise for good causes. And who knows, we might be battling, I don't know, Mr. Blobby for Christmas #1 or something.
Imagine that. You imagine that.
I'm maybe showing my age saying Mr. Blobby. I don't know what the current day thing is.
That would be phenomenal. No, you're right. There's a lot of people who are involved in that, from the individual doing the artwork for the front cover to the producer, the guys down at the studio, the whole thing. It's been an incredible experience, and what we're going to do, Laura, is this is going to be like the focal point of our charity weekender, which this year will be the third year that we've done this, where we go live for 24 hours over a weekend, and we'll be looking to push the downloads of this single. If enough people download it and the momentum starts gathering up, who knows where it'll go. We'll have a nice promotional video recorded for it as well. The Wakes Paul and the guys are absolutely superb. The song itself, written by somebody who's in the Proclaimers and somebody who used to be in the Silencers, and it's a fantastic song. There's a monologue in there that the hairs will be standing up on the edge of your necks for sure when you hear it.
The other thing I would say to people about this is, there's plenty of famous Celtic songs talk about knowing your history. This is a song that tells you about the history of this football club and the origins of this football club. So that apart, if you're relatively new as a Celtic supporter, if you're wanting to read up a bit on the history of the club, you could do no better than starting by listening to this song, because it'll have a lot of information there about exactly what Celtic Football Club stands for and the places and the communities it originated in.
Yeah, The Glory and the Dream. We'll let you hear it very, very soon. I promise. It's not quite finished, but it's almost there. And
I'm feeling very exclusive. Like I've heard a sneak peek and all that. So
like a music reviewer, you've been given it to have a look, and you've come back.
I can be one of these smug people that goes, "Oh, guys, you'll love it. You'll love it."
Superb. I'm not on it, by the way. I've got to say, I did want to play the maracas or
Paul
something.
John's not singing. You're safe. You're
I'm
safe.
definitely not on it. But someone who can sing is. Thanks everybody for getting involved. It's another win for Ange Postecoglou. We go to Spain. I know loads of yous will be going to the game. Quite a few of the Acsom troops are going over to Spain as well. Big, exciting times to be a Celtic fan, even though we are at the Champions League. I look forward to the game. All that's left for me to say once again, Laura Bradburn, thank you for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Thank you.